Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the conversation series that we have here. The Cause is Greater Than I conversation series. And today we are honored to have a dear friend, mentor, and servant leader, Gold Star son, Tony Cordero. Tony, how are you doing today?
Doing very good. Hi, Chad.
And the part of this series that we always like to start with is saying the name of the loved one of the Gold Star family member that we're talking with, and we're talking about Major William E. Cordero, United States Air Force, and we want to honor your family, Tony, and we definitely want to honor your father's legacy and memory by saying his name, and it's very important that we do that, and we want to push that forward to folks that they make sure and say his name as well. And if you could just share with us some things about your father and about his service and his legacy of service that you're carrying on that you would like folks to know.
Sure. My dad was Major Bill Cordero. Try to get that resolution there, but that's a picture of him earlier in his Air Force career, and he was an anomaly in the late 1950s. He was a first-generation Latino who graduated from college, went through the ROTC program at Loyola University in Los Angeles. Latinos didn't graduate from college in the 1950s. And then obviously in fulfilling his commitment to the Air Force, he rose through the ranks, was an officer in the military. And at that time, Latinos weren't officers in just about any branch of the U.S. military. So he was that anomaly, and was married with 5 kids. My mom and the 5 of us kids when he was lost, and he was a patriot and loved what he did, loved to fly. He washed out of flight school, so he couldn't be a pilot, so he became a navigator. And so when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, and he was making lemonade in the backseat of the B-57 when he was lost. And it's painful, and 55 years later, we still remember him, especially here at Memorial Day weekend.
Absolutely, Tony. And of course, you being a founder of Sons and Daughters in Touch, is that a part of how you carry on your father's legacy of service? And if you could tell us a little about your organization.
It is, and it all started with me realizing I was about to outlive him. Dad died when he was almost 30, and when that milestone was coming around the bend in my life, I was asking some questions, and there were no answers. And quite frankly, the simple question was, is there an organization for the kids whose dad's names are on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial? And I searched throughout California and then ultimately in Washington, D.C., and the answer was no. Of course, you have Gold Star mothers and Gold Star wives and all kinds of other organizations related to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, but there wasn't an organization for the sons and daughters. And at that time, in the late 1980s, the country was at relative peace. Vietnam was still top of folks' minds. It was 15 years after the end of the war, so folks still really clearly remembered Vietnam. And so asking one question led to 30 years of journey and putting together an incredible scrapbook of memories and friends and experiences that we didn't plan for, but it just turned out that way.
Absolutely. And having seen, fellow Gold Star family members of yours that share your circumstance of being a child in that era of service with Vietnam, what, as an outsider, I've seen is you extending that even beyond the Vietnam era of service and to later and earlier generations of Gold Star families. And I think that's so meaningful because one of the things that we see is that you will always be a Gold Star son, whether you are 10, 20, 30, and beyond. And if you could just talk a little bit about how, for you, that has been a part of your journey and how connecting with other Gold Star children is a part of what you do every day.
It's interesting because we have learned from older Gold Star families and then are trying to impart some knowledge to younger Gold Star families. And what we learned from the older Gold Star families, World War II and Korea, is that folks didn't know who they were. And in reality, folks didn't know who we were until we started Sons and Daughters in Touch. Now the message is, if you want to know what a young Gold Star child, post 9/11 Gold Star child, what they're going to be like when they grow up, when they're 20, 30, 50 years old, take a look at us, take a look at those from Korea and World War II, and you'll get an indication of everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there are plenty of all of those. There's good, there's bad, and there's some ugly. And it's a challenge. It's a unique challenge, and we're happy to try and partner with both the older Gold Star families and younger Gold Star families to try and share that knowledge. I think the one thing that makes it a little easier for us from Vietnam is that we now have technology that maybe in our 50s, like I am, we're not as afraid of using as, say, a Gold Star son or daughter from World War II, who today is in their mid to late 70s. And, you know, hopping on a Zoom call like this might be a little bit foreign and troublesome to them. So we're happy to use technology to try and share that life experience, because the reality is, if you want to know what life's going to be like for the younger ones, take a look at the older ones, and that gives you a bit of that picture.
Absolutely. And if you could kind of impart part of your perspective and wisdom for, let's say, the general public, and we are moving into Memorial Day weekend, how can we best, even if we don't know you, Tony, and how can we best serve you and your family in this time?
I think the easiest thing for everyone is to simply remember them. We began this conversation by saying my dad's name, and on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, there are 58,276 individuals remembered there. There were 400,000 lost in World War II. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's somewhere around 36, 37,000 in Korea. Throughout history, there are names of men and women who have given their lives so that we have the freedoms that we enjoy. And simply remembering them, saying their names, pausing to think about them, those are important things. This Memorial Day weekend, I think it's critical, with all of the other things that are being thrown at us and how life has been upended for a little while here, that we not lose sight of tradition. And Memorial Day, call it Decoration Day, prior to whatever it was 100 years ago when the name changed, Memorial Day is set aside to remember those Americans who gave their lives serving the country, wearing the uniforms of the United States military. And it's important that we honor those traditions and keep them at our forefront. We can have barbecues, we can have car sales, we can have all the other trappings that go along with the weekend, but let's remember why we have them and the individuals whose blood was shed for us to be able to have them. You know, Chad, it was 2 years ago when you and your grandfather, Woody Williams, and I met at the Nixon Library here in Yorba Linda, where I live. And of course, I still have Woody's challenge coin that is, of course, front and center of the collection of challenge coins I have. But for me, that was an honor, because your grandfather is an American hero. He's an icon. And some of those icons have been laid to rest, and we don't get a chance to shake their hands. We can only remember their names. But when you get a chance to meet somebody like Woody and shake his hand and realize what he lived and what he saw through his eyes during his 90, now 96 years of life, pretty amazing. And so that was a thrill and a treat for me to be able to meet him and you there at the Nixon Library.
Well, it was an honor for us, and as you and I shared some time together before we started this Zoom call, you know, for us that meant so much that day. My grandfather and I talked about it after we met you, and such an honor to meet you. And as you left, you know, my grandfather and I had this conversation about where we were at that moment in that holiday weekend, and to have the perspective of what it is really about. Just like you said, there are so many other things swirling where folks are maybe not focusing on the true meaning of Memorial Day. And, as he and I spoke about that, it just really was laid on our hearts that you and your dad are our Memorial Day, and every day's Memorial Day for you. And as you walked away, it was kind of one of those things where we went, wow, that's, obviously us as an organization, you're the why, and your dad's legacy are the why we do what we do. But to personalize that and the human aspect of that, and when I see that photo of your father, obviously the striking resemblance with you, it really puts that into perspective for all of us who are not Gold Star families, and it gives us a face that we should remember. And I'll say your father's name again, William E. Cordero, Major in the United States Air Force, and we need to say their names and remember that. And one of the things that we've talked about earlier, Tony, if you could just share with folks watching this, you shared a little more about your family outside of your father's military service. Of course, all the things that you pointed to, him being an officer in the United States Air Force at that time in our nation's history, when Latinos weren't, that was not a thing that everybody saw on a consistent basis. But if you could share a little more, so that we can all kind of think about your dad and y'all's family today, and really put that in folks' mind that it is very much a family and a legacy that lives on.
I'd love to. It's a great story that I love to tell because there's so much color and history to it. But most folks who see this video will know of the city of Santa Barbara, California. They may not have been there, but they probably have heard of it. And Santa Barbara is front and center of my family's history. Our ancestors came to what is now California back in the 1760s, and they were soldiers from Spain, essentially. And they were part of the expeditionary force that came and brought that way of life to California. And there's some controversy to that, and I recognize it and understand it. But nonetheless, that was our ancestry. And so 9 or 10 generations ago, those ancestors came here to California, and my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a blacksmith, and he had an 8th grade education, and he made a very, very handsome living being an artist in Santa Barbara, California, pounding on steel to make gates and other lamps and decorative ornamental ironwork, a hammer and an anvil and a coal fire, and he was making those things. And to think that my dad saw that, and he probably said, thinking how my dad might have articulated this, he would have said something like, I don't want to do what my dad did. I love watching him do it, but that's not my life. I want to fly planes. So my dad somehow managed to get a scholarship to Loyola University in Los Angeles in the ROTC program, and off he went. And so for us, Santa Barbara is kind of like our ancestral home. You can go there today and still see plenty of the ironwork that my grandfather made. You can see my dad's name on a couple of different memorials there, along with many of others who lived there and gave their lives in different wars. But that's our family. And when we were growing up, we had this really unique circumstance where dad's plane was lost on June 22nd in 1965. And for almost the next 4 years, he and the pilot were missing in action. And the pilot was Charles Lovelace from New Bern, North Carolina. But they were listed as MIA. And so during that time, mom had 5 kids, didn't know where her husband was, had to try and maneuver through all this stuff. And so it was our grandparents, my dad's parents in Santa Barbara, and then my mom's parents in the San Pedro, Port of Los Angeles area, who really gave us the foundation for me and my 4 siblings to maintain the legacy of our dad, to respect the hellacious challenge that our mom had been saddled with, and to stay out of trouble. and they did a good job of that. They weren't always easy on us. I can remember my grandfather, my mom's dad, giving us all, my brothers and I, a licking for something, and we had a housekeeper that we caused heck for and drove her crazy, and she called them up, and my grandparents came over, and he took a belt and gave us a bit of a scolding with it. And then in Santa Barbara, my grandfather, the blacksmith, he was a tough guy too. But when you look back on it, it was the culture that they grew up with, the Carroll family, the Irish Catholic ones, the Corderos in Santa Barbara, Hispanic Catholics. And so they gave us some grounding and some faith and some direction that really helped us turn out okay, despite some really, really difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. And I think, of course, not having the pleasure and honor of knowing that part of your family, I think it shows through in your character, you being a humble guy. Probably would never say that, but it definitely shows through and your commitment to serving others with Sons and Daughters in Touch, as well as all of the other things that you work on in, kind of the legacy, honoring the legacy of your father and his service and the legacy of your entire family. I know that you had a large Father's Day event scheduled this year in DC, and unfortunately with the pandemic, those plans have had to change. But if you could talk about, your drive and that initiative and really the thought of what y'all were putting together. And I think that it's important that we all work together to support what you were trying to get done there, if we can anyway, in a virtual sense, if you could share that with us.
Sure. When we first started Sons and Daughters in Touch in the late 1980s, the question was, what will we do with this organization? And so on Father's Day of 1992, 10 years after the wall was built, we held the first major Father's Day there. And it was the first time anybody had done anything like this. You had hundreds of sons and daughters come to DC. They'd never seen the wall before. They'd never met anybody else whose dad's name was on the wall. So we pulled that off in 1992. And then every 5 years since then, we have had these major Father's Day gatherings. This year, 2020, was supposed to be the 30th anniversary of the founding of our organization. We were set to have a weekend of events culminating with Father's Day at the wall. And of course, as you said, Chad, the pandemic put those plans on the sidelines. We don't know when or if we'll reschedule that, but we'd like to try and do that. But in the meantime, we're going to have a virtual gathering on Sunday, Father's Day morning, June 21st. And we'll try to make the best of that situation. We'll try to provide some programming and some messaging for the sons and daughters and for anybody else that wants to tune into that. And we will do what we've done for our lifetimes. When we get thrown a curveball, you kind of wait patiently on it, assess the way that it's coming at you, and then at the right time you swing and you hit it. And that's what we will do. We don't have any choice. And in the grand scheme of things, our Father's Day event wasn't the biggest nor most important thing. It was important to people, but it wasn't as critical as people being alive and people being well cared for and being safe. And so we recognize that and would never suggest that our event was so important that it could not be canceled. But we'll make the best of it. We'll find a way to put a good showing together on June 21st and celebrate Father's Day that way, and then look to the future. And when the coast is clear, try to have our rescheduled event.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point that y'all as Gold Star families have to continue recreating resilience. And, I think that everybody can learn so much from y'all in that aspect. You continually have to recreate that. You as a kid, you as a Gold Star child, and then you as a servant leader, you continually with that perspective create strategies of resilience. And so, like you said, I like the way you put it. You look at that curveball, you wait on it, and you wait on that right time. And I know y'all are going to hit a home run with it. And it's great to hear that y'all will have that virtual component of that. I know that we'd love to be a part of that any way we can, and something that we've learned. You and I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. with the virtual opportunity of what we've all tapped into, there are folks that may not be able to get where you're at physically, even without the pandemic. So I think if we can all be in communication, and if there is a learning curve, of course, you were talking about my granddad, our founder, Woody Williams, can get on a Zoom call now at 96 years old, which is pretty amazing. But if we can all look out for one another in that aspect, so that if we find somebody that would like to plug into your programming, and maybe they're not familiar, regardless of their age, they're not familiar or comfortable with doing that, those of us who are can use that as an opportunity to serve and make sure that we plug them in to what y'all are doing. And we're so happy that y'all are still doing that. And what a great way to honor y'all's fathers on Father's Day.
Thanks. And I don't want to bring up the chronological elephant in the room, but it's real. When we started Sons and Daughters in Touch, our members were in their 20s and maybe their early 30s. So add 30 years to that now, and they're in their 50s and early 60s. And, we're not getting any younger. And that's a good lesson for younger Gold Star families, that we have aged and we are a little bit slower walking down the street than we were 30 years ago. But we have to be mindful of that, because it's not as easy for folks to just jump on a plane and fly cross country and do the things. I mean, back then, in the 30 years ago, we loved to go down to the memorial at midnight and spend 2 hours there, just being alone at the wall with our dad's names, where there's no tourists or anything like that. Now, think of that with people who are in their late 50s and some in their 60s. Staying up till 2 a.m. is a bit of a challenge for them. So we just have to be mindful of that. And we are, and it's one of the reasons why we had to cancel the in-person event this year. But hopefully those who were not able to make plans to join us in person can take advantage of this and join us virtually, and we'll make the best of it.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, we can't thank you enough for being a part of the Causes Greater Than That conversation series. I want to say your dad's name as much as I can to honor him. So I'll say it again: Major William E. Cordero, United States Air Force. And I would encourage all of the Gold Star families that are watching this, feel free to, and we encourage you to put your loved one's name in the comment section. When you're watching this video, we would love to say their name in honor, gratitude, and remembrance. And we would encourage everybody, once again, like Tony said, all of us, as a part of our communities all across this country, take a moment. There are plenty of good places on the internet where you can find the names of those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. I know that Tony, even, the wall is a great example. Folks can, we can honor them and carry on their legacy without knowing them. And so we would encourage everyone to, use all those resources of information, get on the internet and look up the names of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and make sure we say their name. I want to say your dad's name again: Major William E. Cordero, United States Air Force. And Tony, any parting thoughts for folks that are watching this today?
Sure, because undoubtedly there will be some Gold Star son or daughter who will say, I didn't know that your organization existed, and I lost my dad in the war, and I want to be part of that. So they can find us on Facebook, Sons and Daughters in Touch, on the web, sdit.org, on Twitter and Instagram. We're all over the place. Find us. We'd love to have you be part of that, because there will be a very special opportunity for Father's Day this year for folks to submit a 10-second video tribute that will be played as part of the Father's Day virtual ceremony. So join us. We'd love to have you. And thanks, Chad. I really appreciate this time today.
Absolutely, Tony. And we'll be sure to push that out. And those of you, if you have any trouble trying to track those links down or contacts, please reach out to us as well. Put it in the comments, and we'll make sure that we connect you with Sons and Daughters in Touch. And thank you once again, Tony. We'll say your father's name again: Major William E. Cordero, United States Air Force.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Tony.